Al bajar Jesús de la barca,
When
vio a
Jesus
toda aquella
landed and saw a
muchedumbre
large crowd,
y sintió compasión
he
de
had
ellos,
compassion on them
pues eran como
because
ovejas
they
sin
were
pastor.
like sheep without a
Y
shepherd.
se puso a
So
enseñarlos
he
largamente.
began teaching them many things.
Avanzada la tarde,
By
se le
this time,
acercaron
it
sus
was late in
discípulos
the
y le
day,
dijeron:
so his disciple came to him.
el lugar es
This
despoblado
is a
y es muy
remote
tarde.
place, they said, and it's
Despídelos
already very
para
late.
que vayan a las
Send
aldeas
the
y a los
people away
pueblos
so
más
they can
cercanos
go
y
to
compren
the
algo que
surrounding
comer.
countryside and villages and buy themselves
Él les
something to eat.
contestó:
But he answered,
dadles
you
vosotros de
give
comer.
them something to eat.
Entonces dijeron:
They said to him,
tendremos que ir nosotros a
that
comprar
would take
200
more
denarios de
than
pan
half a
para
year's
darles de comer.
wage. Are we to
Jesús les
go and
preguntó:
spend that much on bread
¿cuántos
and
panes
giving them
tenéis?
to eat?
Id a ver.
How many loaves do you
Una
have?
vez
He asked.
averiguado,
Go
le
and see.
dijeron:
When they found
5
out, they
panes
said,
y además
5
2 peces.
and 2 fish.
Entonces les mandó
Then
que les hicieran
Jesus
sentarse en grupos
directed
sobre
them
la hierba.
to have all the people
Y se
sit down
acomodaron
in
todos en
groups
grupos de
on the
100,
green
levantando los ojos
grass. So
al
they
cielo.
sat down in groups in hundreds and
Tomó los
50s,
5 panes y los 2
taking the
peces,
5 loaves
pronunció
and
la
the 2
bendición,
fish, and looking up
partió
to
los
heaven,
panes
he
y los
gave
iba
them
dando a
and
los
broke the
discípulos para que
loaves.
los
Then he
distribuyeran.
gave them to his disciple to distribute to
Asimismo,
the
repartió
people.
los 2
He
peces
also
entre todos,
divided the 2 fish
12
among them all.
canastos llenos de las
They
sobras del
all
pan y de los
ate
peces.
and were satisfied.
Recogieron 12
And the
canastos.
disciples picked
Los
up
que habían
12
comido
basketfuls of
eran
broken
5.000
pieces
hombres.
of bread and fish. The number of men who had eaten was 5,000.
Bien.
Okay. So, before beginning, I would like to say hello to all of you, to greet all of you, the ones I haven't greeted yet, and thanking you, to Sister Elvira, and the members of the council for having invited me to share with you the word of the Lord in this day of the council meeting, when Maria del Rosario said, commented the text that I had to share. My question was, what can I say? What is my new input on a text that is so well known, that we have meditated on this text so many times? So this is why I would like to ask you, I would like to ask in this case of the Spirit that is Jesus in the Gospel of John, that will remind to us of all, meaning that to update the word pronounced by God, given by him in a moment and a specific context, but a word that we can find today in new situations, new cultures, with such epochal changes. So I ask for you and for myself the support of the Spirit, so that can help us to remember everything. And before I begin with the specific text, Mark 6, verses 34 to 44, I would like to recall that multiplication of the loaves, the way we talk about it, occurs 6 times in the Gospels. And this speaks to us about the importance of this event for the first Christian community, and especially how important the meaning of the story is. In Mark's Gospel, I would like to contextualize the text. In the Gospel of Mark, we find twice the multiplication of the bread. The first one that takes place in the Jewish territory, and the second one in pagan territory. And between the two texts, we have the well-known story of the Syro-Phoenician woman who goes to Jesus asking for the healing, salvation for her sick daughter. And in facing Jesus' answer, and she had the question was, to whom the bread of the children should be given to, she highlights that even if they are the crumbs of this bread, and she is able to get the bread of the children, which is the gift of salvation. I think that this literary context gives us a way to understand where Mark is heading. So the topic about the bread that we find repeated, the loaves of bread repeated throughout all these chapters of the first half of the gospel, and that then it's going to be mentioned again during the Eucharist. And then in reading this text, in order to prepare this moment of reflection, the first question that came into my mind is leadership. Leadership in what way? And then progressing in reading the text, I wondered, how? How should we lead? Well, Jesus wants to get together with his disciples, he wants to rest, and he wants to deepen the formation of those 12 disciples. But people follow him. And so as he lands, the crowd were already waiting for him on the other side. And the text tells us that Jesus saw the crowd and felt compassion for them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them many things. In some way, this is portraying the situation of the village. From the beginning of this passage of the gospel, Mark is talking to us of a village who is hungry, who is sick, who is excluded, abandoned, that continuously walk in search of Jesus, looking for life, searching for life. If we pay attention to the text, the problem of hunger can be translated, can be seen in the repetition of the words eat and bread, loaves of bread. The verb to eat appears 6 times, and the word loaves of bread appears 5 times. But there are also other words that are verbs, actions that are also very significant, such as to deliver, to distribute, and to hand out. So these details allow us to perceive this context of hunger, and this context of hunger, according to Mark, is rooted in a lack of distribution, in lack of sharing of the bread. This is the situation of the people, of the village people, probably most of the people in the first century. And this situation allows us to see the oppression, both economic, social, that these people had to face. So this is the context where the good news of Jesus Christ, according to Mark, this is when it was written. And it is facing this situation that Mark presents the project of life of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. So the text tells us that Jesus feels compassion, and definitely it's not just a merely human affection. In the Old Testament, compassion is an attribute of God, and in this attitude of Jesus, he is revealing to us, he's making known to us God's inclination towards men. But there's also another very important indication and the important clue in the text. He said he felt compassion on the scattered and abandoned crowd, and he says, like sheep without a shepherd. This sentence highlights the absence of leadership, a leadership that promotes the life of poor and together with the poor. So Christian communities of Mark's time are invited to address this reality. Also, our community, our Christian communities, have this challenge, hunger and absence of leadership, and not just any leadership, but a leadership that promotes the life of and with the poor. The text says that Jesus starts to teach them many things. What would he teach them? Mark does not mention this. We do not find a long speech like in Matthew, but without a doubt, the content of the teaching of Jesus, the words that he addresses to the crowd, they explain what will happen afterwards, meaning that they go in the same direction of what is going to be lived by the people and what Jesus is going to be doing. It says that it starts getting dark. So the disciples realize this. They realize that the people are hungry, and they are the ones who remind this to Jesus. So just as if they were thinking, but how can he not realize? And he continues teaching them, talking to them in such a situation. The disciples, they do have proposals to solve this difficult moment. And the first one, according to the test, is quite clear. They tell Jesus, send the people away so that they can each one look for something to eat. So it's up to them to go find food. This is a proposal of those who consider that hunger of the brother is an individual problem, so it's not a collective problem. And this is why they also think that the solution of hunger is individual. In today's words, we could say that it's an individualistic vision of reality, and so an individualistic proposal. But Jesus denies to accept these proposals. Jesus' proposal is, you give them something to eat. That means, listen, you must take the burden of feeding them. Clearly, the disciples are scared. They reply, and they say, we're going to buy 200 coins to give them to eat, which that meant it corresponded to a half a year wage. But this is the other alternative that the disciples are considering, to buy and to give for free. This is the proposal of supportiveness. So you solve the problem here and now, and then they're on their own. How often it might have occurred to us that in a situation such as this one, we have solved it this way. In some way, we have tried to solve the problem quickly, but we think that we have done something. We haven't let them go away with empty-handed. But Jesus refused also this proposal. And here we can ask ourselves, on this part of the text, what do the proposals of the disciples tell us? That very often we have thought and acted in the same way. These are the proposals of our communities, of our church, in addressing people's hunger. So, if Jesus refuses the proposal of his disciples, so which is the option of Jesus? We must consider that the text continues giving us input, clues to understand, to deepen in the person of Jesus, in his style, in his project. It's not just in solving a specific situation. So the first proposal of individualism, Jesus' answer is clear, concrete, and demanding. You give them to eat. The hunger of people is not their own specific problem, but it is a problem that involves yourself. The hunger of your brother and sister is also your problem. And the disciple has to take on his responsibility and participate in the building of solutions, in finding the solutions. But the second proposal of the disciple was not in that line, wasn't it following that line? So involving in trying to solve the situation. And Jesus refuses also this option. So what does Jesus want? He tells them clearly, you have. Go look, go and see. Go and see. It's not you have. This is a statement that Jesus, you have. So Jesus tells them to go look in what they already have, to go look for what we already have, perhaps what we have kept, what we have saved for cases of need, for prevention. And it's here then, looking for what we already have, they find 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. It doesn't seem a lot. Definitely it's not a lot. Like it's not a lot what the people themselves have. But if we stop and consider the detail, we find that Mark says 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. 5 plus 2 equals 7. So what we have, is it little or if is it a lot? Is it fullness? Is it enough? Is it sufficient? And if we have 7, why is there hunger? And here, we not only talk about material hunger. Is this because we And the same people, we have fallen and believed in the proposal of individualism. Is it might be why the 7 is divided 5 and 2. We all have, even if it's a little bit, but unfortunately, it does not belong to us. It does not belong to all of us. It's mine, or it belongs to my group. It's my safety, my security. That the other should see, well, he can manage things on his own. So it is important to see in this that the solutions that the apostles are looking for, though that come to their mind, are outside of the people, or they're for them, from them to the people. Jesus, on the other hand, does not look for solutions outside, but inside the people themselves. So starting from the people themselves. And so the text tells us in verse 39 that Jesus directs them to organize the people in groups. So this direction in groups of 150s, as we read in the text, and in this division, we have the idea of the people of God, and it evokes the organization of Israel in the times of the desert that was considered the ideal organization of the people of God. In this aspect, there is an acknowledgement of the condition of the people of God, and it wants to also, they can be aware that they are part of the people of God. They are members, and that they also can understand their ability, because the life that this people is looking for exists, and where there is a bond, where there's a communion, where there's fraternity. Just another detail that verse 19 tells us, verse 19, they made them sit, 39, and there were green grass. This is in 39. So this is some aspects, the closeness of Easter. This event is read in as an Eastern event, and the other one has as the background the banquet announced by the prophets, and we can say that this joint meal is already a sign that the kingdom of God is there. So it is also important to see how Mark describes Jesus's gestures, the various gestures of Jesus. He takes the 5 loaves and he offers them. He looks towards, he blesses them, he looks up in the sky, and then he breaks the bread. It's Jesus who breaks the bread, and he gives it to the disciples so they themselves can distribute them. In these gestures that Jesus makes, there is not a description of the miracle. Instead, there's a description of Jesus's role as that of the father of the family father, in the ritual uses of Jewish communion meals, where the father of the family breaks the bread after the blessing, and he is the first one to taste it, and then he distributes it. Here there is a difference, and the difference is that it's the disciples that are going to be in charge of distributing the loaves of bread and the fish. Mark insists, rereading the text, we can see the verses 38, 39, 41, 43, where we appreciate the stress that is put under the importance of the disciples that should collaborate with him. He is giving them a formation in action. What Jesus does, they must do it themselves. They must do this as his followers and collaborators. And we can also notice, even if we don't often do so, or we're not accustomed to do so, at least in the preaching, that the miracle is not done in the hands of Jesus, but in the hands of the disciples and in the hands of the people. So Jesus has the initiative, but he does not take on a leading role. He hands over the realization of this distribution into the hands of the 12 and the people themselves. Jesus gives them an order and also gives them the capacity to do so, to carry it out. Jesus does not appear here as a magician who is pulling fish out of his hat or making marvels, but he is teaching to share, distribute, so that people can eat and they can trust themselves. Jesus did not solve the life of the people with an extraordinary miracle, but with the daily miracle of sharing. Jesus does not make God responsible for the people's hunger and the solution of their hunger, but in God's name, he invites us to take responsibility on our own life and the life of others. Jesus projects a new society, sustained or supported by the gift and by sharing. We might ask ourselves at this point in the text, is this the miracle that he invites us to do it ourselves? So, in this story, we also find some other important aspects, a further proposal, which is at the same time disconcerting and demanding, even if we know it by heart. We can connect and compare verse 44 on this paragraph with that of chapter 14, number 22 in the institution of the Eucharist. And we see that the resemblance is great, that the words and actions of Jesus are practically the same. The Paschal Supper of Jesus with the disciples picks up and it is linked with the scene of the multiplication of the loaves determined by the sharing. And this relationship in the story is intentional. Jesus's gesture and words manifest the deep meaning of his entire life and all his entire life and his proposal. He lived and died as a free gift. He gave himself to others, opposing a society in which the poor are excluded from life and from the banquet. This is why Mark is telling us through the story that the celebration of the Eucharist or the Lord's Supper is the invitation and commitment to do the same. That is, to share the bread with the poor and live for others. It is the commitment to organize the people, to work in the building of a new society where breaking and the distribution of bread so that all have bread and in order to eliminate poverty. It is communion with Jesus, with his person, his project, and therefore it's a real communion with others, especially the poorest in this building of a life project. So the first Christians who wrote the Gospels saw in the sign of bread, the loaves of bread made by Jesus in this multiplication of the loaves. This is why I was saying that it was mentioned 6 times in the Gospel. They saw in this sign something extremely important for our Christian life, for our life of believers, in the way the 4 evangelists write about it, and in the various texts that this is articulated around the theme. Oh, I'm sorry, I cannot hear her anymore. Sister Vivian, unfortunately, we cannot hear you anymore. Sister Vivian, I think that there must have been a...
¿Se escucha?
Yes, we can hear her now. Yep, yes, we can hear her now. Yes, there was a problem with the internet connection. She was saying that the importance for the first Christian communities of the writing of the Gospels had this sign of the bread as something extremely important to be able to understand Jesus, his message, his work, and what it means to believe in him and to follow him. But we can also see the difficulty that community has always faced and the Christian community continues to face in understanding and putting into practice the meaning of shared bread, of sharing the bread. If we continue reading Mark's gospel, we see that it's been told to us that the disciples were debating about the bread and they hadn't understood the story of the bread. Immediately at the end of this text, we can find this. So this shows the difficulty of all the generations in order to understand the deepness of the sign. We might ask ourselves here if have sometimes felt surprised, questions, or felt discomfort in this practice of Jesus. If the practice of Jesus has made us change, or if we have changed him so that he fits in our models, in our practices, in our securities. Let's try how to apply this text today. The situation of the world in the time of Jesus and in the time of Mark have many elements in common with our current world, especially if we think uh, if we think about hunger and the lack of sharing, and also the absence of leaders in order to guide the life of the people and together with the people. Definitely, I don't know whether you have had this moment or you will have it further on, but I know that you're going to dedicate time on this analysis of the different realities where our entities are inserted. So I'm not going to make any comment on this, but as I say, we can find this contact points. And in trying to respond to myself, the question, why leadership, that has come out when I started reading the text, I see that there is an immediate horizon. And this immediate horizon is definitely the mission, preaching, and the building of the common good, as it's been is set to us by our laws, by our ways of life. As to the leadership, we also find in our constitutions, we can say that we find a definition, which is the authority is the power to make life grow. And I find a point of contact with Mark's passage. So the power to make life grow, the seeds of life that is present in each sister and in each reality and in each brother who we are in touch with. And Mark points out the life of the people and together with the people. The model of leadership in which Jesus tries to form the 12 and the people, we call this co-responsibility, circularity, this way of allowing life to circulate among ourselves and among the people. And today in the church, this model this does not have a new name, yes, but it's not a new name, but the name dates back a long time, but we start using the word synodality, and perhaps even if it's an expression that dates back a long time, it might sound today as something, a novelty in our vocabulary, meaning that we change the name of circularity or co-responsibility. However, this word has some aspects which are interesting because it talks to us about us as being together. In being together, in virtue of, in this case, all, talking of the church, all believers, we walk, we journey together, and there are some who preside over the fraternity. It indicates this journey together, and it is important for us to consider that this expression, synodality, this dimension, Pope talks about the constitutional aspect of the church, synodality. This implies events and processes, so synodal processes, which have at its core the exercise of discernment. For example, this extended council, it is an event, a synodal event, and it also involves synodal structures such as provinces, delegations, commissions, teams, and in a particular way, it involves dispositions or attitudes which are synodal. The text, the document of the International Theological Commission speaks about synodality in the life and the mission of the church, and it lists many of these dispositions, provisions, always connected to the Eucharist and its deep meaning of the Eucharist. And some of these attitudes are definitely common: listening of the word, of welcoming, mutual welcoming, mutual listening, humbleness, kenosis, and we can add to these synodal attitudes the various ones that Father Timothy mentioned in his talk on Christian leadership. So this synodal life, the text that I mentioned, is a diaconate in the promotion of social, economic, political life of all the people under the sign of justice, solidarity, and peace. And also I find elements of contact with our elements of our charism. And here I would ask myself about our fullness, our seven. Where does it pass from? What is it? Without a doubt, each one of us has many gifts and talents that perhaps in the time of silence that we, after the Lectio, we can go and see which they are. Each entity of the congregation has them, and it's important to see them, to recognize them, to value them. But as a congregation, can we identify our fullness, our seven? I just want to mention two, because I think that has to do with the topic of the extended council. Father Timothy reminded us that our Father Dominic did not leave anything in writing, but he did leave us a spirituality of government. And I was wondering, in reading the gospel text, so if this is our birthmark, this governance spirituality, why is it still 5 plus 2 and not 7? Also, Brother Bruno, in one of his letters talking about the government, he said to us that this is what we have to offer to the church and to society: this style, this government spirituality in a world such as ours, without leaderships that walk to the side of the people, It is a fullness that we cannot deprive others. And on the other hand, identified by a gift that we have received some years ago, which has turned us into new, which is the gift of unity, of reunification, that we can say has come to join our fraternity. And the other key topic that the evangelical text speaks to us about is this connection with the multiplication of the loaves, with the institution of the Eucharist, with the gift of the Eucharist, with this prophetic gesture of Jesus' self-giving on the cross, self-giving with which he seals a new final covenant. This gesture and words of Jesus that show the deep meaning of his whole life and his proposal. And this made me think that in this time, pandemic, where we have seen ourselves limited due to isolation in the participation in person of the Eucharistic celebration, definitely we have tried to think of how to do it, and perhaps to do it either through television, social networks, or in celebrations in our homes and communities. But I felt that this isolation is quite long. I could feel the risk of staying stuck in the ritual, in this participation through the screen that is just focused on the ritual, and it's without the deep meaning. And I found in the writings of Pope Francis and in his homilies, and I was struck by this as if it was a call, an invitation. And I was saying, I found the repetition of the word covenant, alliance. And I was wondering why is Pope so much focusing of this expression, alliance, covenant. He speaks in his different writings of sealing a compact, cultural, social pact, a global compact on education in order to face the educational crisis. And he says that it's an agreement in order to live together. But out of this agreement that is based on giving value to the uniqueness of each one, who respects and assumes a different worldviews, cultures, of lifestyles that coexist in society, an alliance that brings out a reconciled diversity that is quite strong. And in Laudato Si, he speaks about an alliance between humanity and the environment in order to heal and save our common home. And in his last document, Fratelli Tutti, he talks to us about this dream of matter of bringing about again the worldwide desire of brotherhood among all people. And I was thinking that this is the horizon of utopia, the horizon of utopia, but also the horizon that is being built in our here and now. Okay, I would like to leave here this reflection. I know that you have some time of silence, and so that the Spirit will continue speaking to you. And then, in this moment of silence, I propose to you, so when we're going to come back, each one can bring a small sentence that can be either taken by the text of the gospel or the reflection, or what the Spirit has triggered in each one of you, starting from this lectio, this reading of the word. This small sentence is going to be used in our final prayer, in the moment of final prayer. Thank you.